Hey, John, a new study shows that what we've found to be true is true. People think they're going to retire when they're 65 or 67 or 70, but they actually retire a lot earlier than that. Hi, I'm Bridget Sullivan Mermel, and I've got a fee only financial planning practice in Chicago, Illinois.
And I'm John Shear. I've got a fee-only financial planning practice in Middleton, Wisconsin. And before we dig into why people actually retire earlier than they typically plan to, I want to remind everybody to hit that subscribe button. That helps other people find this information on YouTube. And with that, Bridget, I love your introduction about, there's things that are perceptions, things that we read about in the, online and things. And at least my reality of what I see with clients isn't always the same as what that perception is. And I know it's the same for you too. So I'm interested in digging into this topic here today.
Yeah, when you actually look at this research, and we see it in our continuing education classes too. So this isn't just one weird study that is showing information that no one else agrees with, and we'll link to it in our notes. But what they're basically saying is only, let's see, 13 plus 6, 20% of the people-ish retire after age 66. 20% of the people, okay, and then 80% of the people retire earlier than that. All right, and the average age for retirement from the workers' mouths, this is when I actually retired, is 62. The average age people expect to retire is 65.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Isn't that
that's,
isn't that
and from
interesting?
our perspective, 3 years is a big gap when you're actually planning where's the money coming from.
Right, right. And it's interesting. I had been teaching a retirement class here at the local technical college, and very similar information I had come across in one of the workbooks that we had was talking about how two-thirds of the people plan to work beyond age 65 and even to age 70, right? And so a third plan to retire earlier than that, but what actually happened in reality was exactly the reverse, right? So the same as this study is showing that something like a third of people retire after age 65 and two-thirds are retired by the time they get there, right? So
Yeah.
again, it's to your point, this is not a one-time deal, and just really interesting for me how people think about retirement and that age and sort of what we can do. And when I talk with folks, usually the conversations are more along the lines of, can I retire at 62 or 60 or 57 or something? Or can I retire early? Can I afford to? Right. And then the default, the alternative being, well, if I can't do that, then I'll just work until I'm 65 or 70 or whatever the math is on that. Right. So
Yeah.
it's really interesting. Yeah.
And I might, with some clients, I will say, let's have a stretch goal. How about 60? They'll
Yeah.
come in saying, oh, I want to retire at 65. And then I'll say, let's have a stretch goal. What if you could retire at 60 or 62? What would that be like?
Yeah.
And I know people currently, and it's like, so why does this happen? Why is there this gap? Because even people that are 55 really think this too. And so why is there's this perception gap? And it seems there's a few things. First of all, the people who I see who actually do work when they're older, like after age 67, it's not it's not about physical ability, because I think most people who are 67 certainly have the physical ability to work. That's not the limiting factor. It's the people who do work generally have their own businesses, and I don't have stats on this. This isn't coming from stats. This is just coming from my experience. They have their own businesses, so they have total autonomy, or maybe they have a pension and they really do determine their age. Now that's not 100%. Like, so I know one person who is in a pension system, but their position got eliminated. Okay, so that's a different situation, right?
Right.
If you thinks they have total autonomy, then doesn't. So I think that's the question: is what about these other forces? Is your company going to stay in business? How do you fit on the org chart, the big org chart in the sky? Those are questions I think that people are not necessarily thinking about when they're thinking about the retirement age.
Yeah. One thing that's interesting to me as I think about this is look at where the unemployment rate has been, at least recently here, right? Where there's a big demand for workers, right? Or at least it seems like that from what all the things I see and read. And curious a sort of dichotomy of people that maybe, jobs eliminated, different things happen, so where they can't do the things that they were doing, but they don't work. Is it because they cannot find a job when all these companies are hiring, or is it that the jobs that are available aren't the right fit for them? And I don't know the answer. I'm just curious as to what your opinion is on that.
Well, and it's also how hard am I going to look for a job?
Right.
Like, how much internal motivation do I have now to put myself out there like that and go get a job? And then ageism is real. And there's ageism, like people think, oh, you're old, you can't work a computer. But then there's also ageism, and I don't know if this is exactly ageism, but a lot of times when you hire people, you have this fantasy that you're going to be working with them for 15 or 20 years. And you don't, if somebody's older, you can't really
Right.
entertain, you don't generally entertain that same kind of fantasy.
Right.
So, I mean,
Right.
again, there's a big gap in what actually happens and what people want to happen in that realm too. But I think there's forces working against people when they're looking when they're 16.
Yeah. And it seems to me that there's something different about I choose to leave my full-time job and I know this thing that I'm going to go to as a secondary job. We've got folks. Just what a client recently retired. He's going to go to the golf course and cut grass in the morning and get free golf at the golf course, right? And things like that, and that's part of the plan, as opposed to the other side where suddenly your job is eliminated or whatever happens, and now you're sort of thrust into this position as opposed to your plan that you had being something different when you have that change of plans. It's interesting. And again, as I said, I get people, hey, can I retire earlier is sort of the question. Let's say we're forced into retirement early, right? For whatever reason, or we choose, hey, job downsized, and I just don't want to go through what it takes to go and, work for half the wages I was working for before, sort of thing. What's the reality of that? What does that look like? Or how do you have those conversations with clients that maybe are planning, hey, listen, my plan's to work until 65 or 67 or 70. And then and my reaction to that, hey, that's great, but let's talk about what happens if you can't for some reason, right? And I assume that you kind of do something similar.
Absolutely. And so then you look at, okay, and this is just kind of plan B, like this. So this is, you have your optimal plan, but then you maybe your plan B. And so then it's thinking about what you want your life to be like. I think that's first. And then thinking about, okay, how is this going to impact my spending? But interestingly, also same survey, they said that people are happy when they're retired, they're happy with retirement. Some people are stressed out about money, but it seems to be 25% of the people. Like, so other people figure it out, just
Yeah.
like we talk about with young people. They figure it out. Like, how am I going to work this? You
Right.
know, and one factor I think that comes up when we're doing these is like, well, if you want cash flow, what about Social Security? You can take that at 62 if you're not working. I
Right.
mean, we're not going to get into the details of taking Social Security at 62 in this episode. So there's more to say about that. But that's a possibility. There's maybe you wait until you're 65, or 67 or 70. But again, we'll save that conversation, but that's one of the things that are in play.
Yeah. I know, I think that's exactly right. And I have the conversation with folks about, and I think you mentioned it with your stretch goal idea is, okay, that's great. Here's the plan. But, if you are at 62 and now suddenly you find yourself out of work for various reasons, health reasons, other things, what does that look like? Right. And what's the we call it kind of the Cadillac retirement. And then what's the whatever Chevy Chevette or some other, like, hey, just the basic getting around sort of thing. And so that you have this idea of, what, we don't necessarily need to do all the things that we want to do. And for every individual, it can be different, right? You might go, listen, yep, I'm going to do this. And if things change, great, I'm not going to do those things, but I'm also not going to go out and, kill myself to find a new job, sort of a thing, right? And it's just a choice. And knowing what the choices are and having the facts, I think, is super important.
The same survey looks at how many people actually work in retirement. And again, people think they're going to work in retirement more than they actually do work in retirement. And both of these survey results, both working until you're 70-ish and working in retirement, I am all for. I like, from a happiness standpoint, I think it makes sense to work longer and work maybe not quite so hard. But from both from a happiness and a social engagement standpoint.
Yeah.
But you got to look at reality too, and like, okay, the thing is that things happen. Again, another factor that comes into play with people is sometimes they have a health emergency, or their spouse has a health emergency, or I have a lot of clients who are retired and their parents are still alive. So the parent has health emergency, like, so there's a whole bunch of different factors that can come into play. And so that can motivate, again, retirement for people who are totally able-bodied. And, it's not that they're not capable. It's just these other things are happening.
I think at the end of the day, I love that description of those, right? The different things that come, the things that we don't know. And it comes down to me to be basic financial planning. Here's the plan. But the reality is what we plan is probably not going to work out that way for reasons we don't have any idea what they are, right? And I love that. I always think, hey, if I have a health problem or I have a stroke, that throws a monkey wrench in my plans. What if my parents? What if my kid? What if my grandkids? I mean, we know people that are raising grandkids in their 60s and 70s, right? I mean, life happens. And taking a look at those options and being prepared for the different contingencies, right? It's just financial planning when it all comes down to it, I guess, as I think about that. And, but not getting locked into one plan. Not, I'm going to work till I'm 65 or 70, have that be the only plan. Plan A, yes. But the only plan, no, you have to be aware of the options, right?
Right, absolutely. So I think that's a great place to wrap it up. I'm Bridget Sullivan Mermel. I've got a field-only financial planning practice in Chicago, Illinois.
And I'm John Shear. I've got a fee-only financial planning practice in Middleton, Wisconsin. Both Bridget and I are taking on new clients. We'd love to hear from you, but we're also both members of the Alliance of Comprehensive Planners, which is a nationwide group of fee-only planners that are tax-focused, that think similar to Bridget and I. So if you like what you hear on our show and you want to find somebody in your local area, you can check out acplanners.org.
And please subscribe.